Five Nights at Freddy's 6, officially titled Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, is one of the most thematically dense and narratively important entries in the entire series, because it disguises itself as something small, silly, and even comedic, while quietly functioning as the final convergence point for nearly every major character, storyline, and moral question the franchise has raised. On the surface, it presents itself as a light-hearted tycoon-style game where the player builds and manages a pizzeria, buys animatronics, and attracts customers. This deliberate tonal misdirection is essential to its impact, because it mirrors the way the characters within the story are lured into a false sense of normalcy before the truth reveals itself. The game is not about running a restaurant, it is about ending a cycle of suffering that has persisted for decades. The player character is not clearly identified at first, which allows the role to feel like a continuation of previous protagonists while also remaining ambiguous. As the nights progress, it becomes clear that this is not a random job, but a carefully engineered trap. Henry, one of the original creators of the animatronics and a deeply remorseful figure, has orchestrated the events of the game. Unlike earlier entries where the player is reacting to danger, here the danger is intentional and controlled. The building is designed to attract the remaining haunted machines, not to keep them out. This inversion of the usual survival horror mechanics reframes the entire experience, making the player complicit in a larger plan rather than merely a victim. The animatronics themselves represent unresolved remnants of past tragedies. Scrap Baby, Molten Freddy, Scraptrap, and Lefty are not just enemies but broken vessels carrying the consequences of earlier actions. Each one symbolizes a different aspect of the franchise's long-running themes: obsession, guilt, manipulation, and the inability to let go. Their designs are deliberately chaotic and damaged, visually communicating that these are not characters meant to continue existing. They are things that should have ended long ago, but were held together by agony, artificial intelligence, and unfinished business. The fact that the player can choose to salvage them or discard them reinforces the illusion of choice, while the narrative quietly pushes all paths toward the same inevitable conclusion. In Five Nights at Freddy's 6, each animatronic is far more than an obstacle or enemy. They are narrative artifacts, carrying the weight of past games, unresolved trauma, and the consequences of human obsession. Their designs, behaviors, and even the way they enter the building are deliberate reflections of who they are and why they exist. This game treats animatronics not as monsters to be feared in isolation, but as damaged remnants that have outlived their purpose. Scrap Baby is perhaps the most emotionally complex animatronic in the game. She is the final form of Circus Baby, who herself was created as a tool for manipulation and murder. By the time she appears as Scrap Baby, she has lost nearly all pretense of elegance or performance. Her body is asymmetrical, patched together from mismatched parts, with exposed wiring and a massive claw replacing one arm. This design visually reinforces her internal state, a being built to deceive and capture, now reduced to raw intent and hunger for attention. Elizabeth Afton's presence within her is still evident, but it is warped by years of isolation and rejection. Scrap Baby speaks with confidence and pride, believing she has achieved independence, yet her dialogue reveals a deep need for validation, particularly from her father. She sees herself as deserving of recognition, not realizing that she is still trapped by the very purpose she was designed for. Her end in the fire is tragic because it represents a child who never escaped manipulation, only learned to perpetuate it. Molten Freddy is the embodiment of chaos and fragmentation. Unlike other animatronics that house a single dominant identity, Molten Freddy is a tangled mass of wires and masks, containing what remains of Enid after internal conflict tore it apart. The absence of a stable face or form reflects the loss of individuality within. This animatronic is not driven by a clear goal or emotion, but by instinct and rage, the collective suffering of multiple spirits compressed into a single, unstable entity. Its laughter and erratic movements emphasize how far removed it is from anything resembling a performer or character. Molten Freddy exists purely as a consequence of prolonged containment and experimentation, showing what happens when souls are treated as interchangeable components. It is less a villain and more a warning about the dehumanization at the core of the series' darkest moments. Scraptrap, the final incarnation of William Afton's physical body, strips away any remaining illusion of control or brilliance. Unlike previous versions that leaned into intimidation or mystery, Scraptrap is pitiful in appearance. His suit is deteriorated, his movements unnatural, and his body visibly failing to contain him. This version emphasizes decay rather than menace, reinforcing the idea that Afton's continued existence is unnatural and unsustainable. He is no longer a mastermind hiding behind layers of deception. He is a man refusing to accept the consequences of his actions. His dialogue reveals arrogance and denial, clinging to the belief that survival equates to victory. Scraptrap's presence in the game is essential because it reframes him not as an unstoppable evil, but as a cautionary figure consumed by his own refusal to let go. Lefty stands apart from the others because it is not driven by malice or self-preservation. Lefty is a containment unit, designed specifically to capture and restrain the puppet. Its calm, subdued exterior hides a deliberate purpose, to bring the puppet to the same end as the others. The puppet has long represented misplaced responsibility and endless protection, endlessly trying to save others without saving itself. Lefty's design, with its heavy build and muted behavior, communicates restraint rather than aggression. This animatronic symbolizes Henry's final act of responsibility. Instead of allowing the puppet to continue wandering, bound by guilt and obligation, he gives it an ending. Lefty's inclusion emphasizes that even beings created with good intentions can become trapped in cycles of suffering. The mediocre melodies and other purchasable animatronics may seem less important at first glance, but they serve a crucial thematic role. They represent the commercialization and trivialization of the tragedies underlying the franchise. These characters are exaggerated, cartoonish, and almost mocking in their presentation, highlighting how Fazbear Entertainment repeatedly tried to mask horror with cheap entertainment. Their presence reinforces the idea that the company's attempts to move on were never about healing, only about profit and distraction. Even when they are not directly tied to haunted spirits, they contribute to the environment that allowed such suffering to persist. Taken together, the animatronics in Five Nights at Freddy's 6 form a complete narrative ecosystem. Each one is a different response to trauma: denial, fragmentation, obsession, misplaced duty, and exploitation. None of them are truly villains in the traditional sense. They are results. The fire that ends the game does not punish them, it releases them. That is what makes this entry so powerful. It does not ask the player to defeat monsters, but to understand why they existed and why they should finally be allowed to stop existing. Henry's presence is felt throughout the game long before he speaks directly. His calm, instructional tone in the ending speech contrasts sharply with the violence and madness that defined earlier antagonists. He does not speak with hatred, even toward William Afton, the primary architect of the murders. Instead, he speaks with exhaustion and acceptance, acknowledging that this entire story is the result of mistakes that spiraled out of control. His decision to end everything through fire is not framed as revenge, but as release. Fire has always been a recurring motif in the series, often associated with destruction that fails to fully cleanse. In this game, however, it finally succeeds because it is guided by intention rather than desperation. William Afton's role in Five Nights at Freddy's 6 is especially significant because it strips away his mythic presence and reduces him to what he truly is: a man trapped by his own refusal to die and his inability to feel remorse. His line about always coming back is no longer threatening but tragic, because it reveals that his persistence is not power but punishment. He is not escaping consequences, he is prolonging them. The fire does not give him a dramatic final victory or defeat, but instead forces him into silence, ending his influence over the narrative world. The ending monologue is one of the most important moments in the entire franchise because it directly addresses the spirits of the children, the animatronics, and even the player. Henry acknowledges the pain caused, admits his failures, and explicitly states that the cycle ends here. This moment reframes the entire series as a tragedy about unintended consequences rather than pure evil versus good. While William represents cruelty, Henry represents regret, and the tension between those two forces defines the story more than any jump scare ever could. What makes Five Nights at Freddy's 6 especially powerful is how it balances closure with ambiguity. While it clearly ends the main storyline involving the haunted animatronics and their creators, it does not over-explain every mystery. Instead, it trusts the player to understand the emotional resolution, even if some details remain unclear. This restraint is part of why the ending resonates so strongly. It feels earned, not because every question is answered, but because the story finally stops running from its own themes. In the context of the franchise as a whole, this game functions as both a conclusion and a critique. It looks back at the endless sequels, resurrections, and escalating horror and asks whether continuing the story actually serves the characters trapped within it. By choosing to end things through sacrifice and finality, Five Nights at Freddy's 6 argues that some stories should not go on forever. Some stories are only meaningful when they are allowed to end.